Good morning. Good morning. It's good to see everybody this morning. I'm running, but we're going to make it happen. How's your week been? Good. Good. That's what I like to hear. Mine has been busy, but it's been good. I like busy. I told Heather, I said, this week and last week have been the two busiest weeks since March that I've had. But I feel like a preacher again. I feel good. This is great. You know, it's like that little bit of time when you couldn't go and visit and that sort of thing. And now we're actually able to kind of get out and go see folks. And then at the same time, being able to the kids are back in school. So being able to get to the office and have that time for meditation has been a blessing, really, truly. Now, we're going to get into our study on Engraving Heavenly Truths, and I've got my clicker somewhere. Do y'all see the
Devil, sin, and hell?
Devil, sin, and hell. All right. We're going to talk about lesson 6 in Engraving Heavenly Truths. This quarter is the devil, sin, and hell, and we're discussing the flood. We're going to talk about that for just a minute. The details of the flood you can find in Genesis 6 through 8. Now, one of the things that I wanted to mention here. I'll mention it in just a second. The flood came about 1,656 years after creation. You know, they take this by adding up the lives of those who were living from Adam until then. And so they use that math and they come up with 1,656 years. So that's almost 2,000 years. You know, we think about the fact that we're 2,000 years from Christ. And the world is wicked and that sort of thing. The Bible tells us he's long suffering, but by the way things look, I'm not telling you he's coming back tomorrow, but I am telling you that we better be ready when he gets here. We better. You know, it doesn't take long before he decides it's time to come back. It's time to get things done, or it's time to do something else. You know, we all know that Jesus came 2,000 years ago and paid the price for all men's sin. So we better be ready when he comes back to bring us home. The highest mountains of the earth were covered and all mankind was destroyed. Now you think about that, the highest mountains of the earth. What would be, I think the highest mountain is it Fiji? No, it's not Fiji. It's not Fiji. It's, say it again. Mount Everest. Yeah, climbing to the top of Mount Everest. And you got people that make documentaries on this. Now you think about Mount Everest and how high that is and how tall that is. That's a lot of water, isn't it? So the canopy that fell upon the earth had a lot of water in it. And we can tell that by knowing that the very top of the mountain was even covered. The flood was caused because of sin. This is what you're going to put right there when it's discussing that. Every thought of man was only evil continually. And sin will always bring punishment. There's not one sin that's going to go unpunished. And the reason for that flood, look at Genesis 6, 5, and 6. And God saw that the wickedness of man was great in the earth, and that every imagination and thought of his heart was only evil continually. And it repented the Lord that he had made man on the earth, and it grieved him at his heart. Listen to the thoughts right here concerning the Lord. He says it grieved him at his heart. The Lord said, I will destroy man, whom I've created from the face of the earth, both man and beast, and the creeping thing, and the fowls of the air, for it repenteth me that I have made them. He was saying here, he was upset. He was sorry that he had even done anything. Now listen, why is that? Because there was an expectation of man from the very beginning. And they weren't doing what was expected of them, and he was upset with it. So that's when he comes to Noah. And he says, I need you to build me an ark, because I'm going to take care of all this wickedness in the world. That's what happened. We know that that's exactly what took place. Noah and his family were spared, and the animals that were on the ark, but everything else was wiped clean and made new. And as I said, the reason for that flood is because we weren't thinking right. Man was thinking for himself, feeding his own desires. What do we know about the Lord? That he wants us to seek him, right? And if we're only looking for things to fulfill our needs, we're going to be in trouble. Do y'all see the next slide, or is that still on the flood? Okay, I'm sorry. I might ask y'all that a couple times this morning. I feel like I'm still running wide open. I'm trying to get settled down now. Sin of Jacob. Sin of Jacob. The sin of Jacob was committed when he was at least 40 years old, and we see that from Genesis 26 and 34. And Esau was 40 years old when he took his wife Judith, the daughter of Beeri the Hittite, and Bashemath, the daughter of Elon the Hittite. When we look at the sin of Jacob, what was it that he did?
He stole his brother right from his brother right from his brother, older brother, and then stole it, threw it fooling his father.
Yeah, deceiving his father. That's what you're going to write there in that blank, is that he deceived his father. That was the sin, is he lied. He deceived his father. But yeah, exactly. That's what I wanted to point out. It was with his mama's help. With his mama's help. Now, it says Jacob later reaped some of the consequences of his sin when his father-in-law Laban deceived him. You remember that? He deceived him. What goes around comes around, don't it? It does. You're going to reap what you sow. He deceived his daddy, and then later Laban deceived him. Told him, he told him he wanted Rachel, and he gave him Leah first. Made him work 7 more years on top of that for Rachel. Of course, we know and we see that he did that. He did definitely do it, but he was tricked, wasn't he? We talked about that. Jacob means supplanter, that second point there, which means to supersede or replace. A deceiver, to believe something that is not true. To deceive somebody is to make them believe something that is a lie. And that's exactly what we see Jacob doing with the help of his mother. And he said is not he rightly named Jacob. Is not he rightly named Jacob? His name means deceiver. Don't his name fit him? Don't his name suit him? Now I want to talk to you about that for just a minute. How many times have you said, okay, knowing families develop reputations. My dad's side of the family was rough around the edges. And Jenkins were known, like my dad had 2 brothers, so there was 3 of them. And folks around the area where we grew up on that old country road where they grew up, they would say, oh, them Jenkins boys. Oh, they were always raising a bunch of cane with them Morgans. And so it was the Jenkins and the Morgans that were always into trouble or always doing some kind of mischief, wrecking cars and just racing cars, wrecking them, doing all kinds of stuff. And we developed a name for it. When I was about 17 years old, I went to work. I was living with my dad. I went to work, and this fella asked me what my name was. I told him, and he said, oh, you're not one of those Jenkins boys, are you? Jenkins, like Jeff Jenkins, is that your daddy? Yes, he is. And so it's like I said, his young and wild root, those wild oats that he sowed back when he was younger, during his teenage years, they followed him all them years. His name suited him. Is not he rightly named Jacob? Now, I want to tell you, when I was 17, 18 years old, guess what I was doing? Same thing my daddy was doing. Messing around, acting a fool, not doing what I was supposed to do. So guess what? It fit me. That Jenkins, I lived up to it. Because I was known for doing the same thing. As I said, we need to stand away from that. We need to stand against what others might say. It don't matter what your background is. They don't have anything to do with it. When the Lord comes into your life, he can change you. He can make you new. And you don't have to be the same example as your daddy or your granddaddy. And like I said, I'm living proof of that. I don't have to go back to that. I had a good daddy. He was always a great father. But he was wild in his younger years. Very wild. Now, so the sin of Jacob was that he deceived his father. Is that where you're seeing right there?
Yep.
Let's talk about the sin of Nadab and Abihu. Now, we have a lot to cover in this lesson. It's going to just talk about different sins in the Old Testament, different people in the Old Testament that had different things going on. Nadab and Abihu were two sons of Aaron. Aaron was a Levite, right? And so the Levites were a line of priests. Remember that? It was the Levites that were the ones that were priests.
Well, only Aaron's sons were priests out of the Levites.
I'm sorry.
Only Aaron's sons were priests out of the Levites.
Okay.
Aaron and his family.
But they were in line is what I'm trying to say. You're right.
Yeah, okay.
Be more specific. Yes, it was Aaron's sons that were in line to do that, to do the priestly duties. And so they had a lot of things right in the situation. Let's go to Leviticus chapter 10. Leviticus 10, and then we're going to start in verse 1. And Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, took either of him his censer, put fire therein, and put incense thereon, and offered strange fire before the Lord, which he commanded them not. And there went out fire from the Lord and devoured them, and they died before the Lord. Now I want to read verse 3. That's not in our study, but I want to read it right here. I think there's a key point right here. Then Moses said to Aaron, this is it that the Lord spake, saying, I will be sanctified in them that come nigh me. And before all the people I will be glorified. And Aaron held his peace. Now, one thing we need to realize is that God is going to have to be sanctified. He is holy, right? And everything about him is holy. Therefore, when we approach him and we do things for him, like the priests were to do it the exact way that it was to be done. Why? Because God's not going to be mocked. It's not some ordinary thing that's going on. When they make a sacrifice, when they make a sacrifice, it needs to be authorized. That word strange means unauthorized. Strange fire, unauthorized fire. That's what they had that was missing. They had a lot of things going right for them. They had a lot of things that they were doing correctly, but the one thing that they brought to the whole situation that messed them up entirely was the strange fire, unauthorized fire. There's a lot of our friends that do a lot in regards to worship correctly, but they might bring one thing that's not authorized. And if it's not authorized, it's not going to go unpunished. And that's the lesson we can learn from Nadab and Abihu. You can do a lot of things right, but if you do one thing wrong, God is holy. He has to stand apart from that. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, exactly. What was it that God told him to do? He told him
all he did.
Good intention. He had a good intention when he reached up to try to save the ark from falling off the cart. He was trying his best to save that which was sacred in the eyes of God. But the problem was God told him to carry it with staves, and they put it on a cart. Look, they might have thought that they were doing something good. They very well might have thought that, hey, this is a better way of getting it done. But the problem is, it was not what God had commanded. There's a whole lot of folks that'll tell you that worship sounds better when it's sang with instruments. There's a whole lot of people that says, man, when those instruments are in there, it just makes the timing better. It makes people sing louder. They get more excited. They're more on fire. No, but that's not what God asked for, is it? It was unauthorized. And while I say it, like I said, while they think they're doing something that is okay, they think it's okay, they think it's right, they think it's just adding to it, it's not what the Lord asked them to do. This is important. Uzzah, Nadab, and Abihu, strange fire, unauthorized fire. We have to operate within the perimeters that God has set. What kind of wood did he tell Noah to build the ark out of? Gopher. So nothing else would have mattered, would it? Nothing else would have done what he needed done. He said, I need it done out of gopher wood. We have to make sure we do it the way God asked. And when he did build the ark, I want to just go back into that. Obedience was necessary to receive what God, for them to be taken care of. Obedience was absolutely necessary. He said, I want it to be this wide. I want it to be this tall. I want it to be made out of this wood. I need it to have rooms within it. And I need there to be 3 levels. How many windows?
1.
How many doors? 1. It's important that he did it the way God asked him to do it. Had it been done any other way, I don't know that we'd be reading this right now.
Can you imagine being
We have to do it the way God asked.
Park or in a room with only 1 window for 40 days?
Well, they were in there over a year.
Yeah.
From the
Yeah.
time they went into the guy.
Yeah, it was a long time.
What
It was
about
a
the
long
sunlight
time.
you need?
God provided that.
Well, I'm sure it had a place for you to walk out up on top. I don't know that to be true, but you might have been able to walk out there and get some sunlight. But the thing about it is, you had to be in the boat for you to be above that water, period. Whether it had, but yeah, you need sunlight. You're right. You need all those things. And for it to be 1 window, hey, is there one way to get to heaven? There is, isn't it? One way. Jesus. There was 1 door, wasn't there?
Whatever they needed, though, God supplied it.
I love looking at the ark and talking about that, because who was it that shut the door? Isn't that awesome? I just think about, man, wow, it's incredible. He sealed it. He sealed it shut. It was his hand that closed them in and kept them safe. Had the door stayed open, water would have got in. But see, God provided. Yahweh closed the door. It's amazing. Hebrews 2 and verses 1 and 2. We ought to give a more earnest heed to the things which we've heard. When we look at this Old Testament things, when we see this, what does Romans 15:4 say? That the things that were written before time were written for our learning. Right. And so when we see these things, we ought to give a more earnest heed to them. And a more earnest heed, not just to take them lightly. Oh, yeah, that's what they did. That's all right, but I'm going to do it this way. No. Earnest heed. Earnest. Serious. Look at it serious, because that's exactly the way God operates. It says, lest at any time you should let them slip. What's the danger in letting them slip? Separation from God. Separation from God. If we don't do what's necessary, we're going to be in trouble. For if the word spoken by angels was steadfast, and every transgression and disobedience received a just recompense of reward. Aaron was told not to mourn greatly over his sons, because what they had done received the right reward.
They got what they deserved.
There you go. They got what they deserved. There's a song that I remember, and I think it's a rock song, but it says this. It says, you get what you put in, and people get what they deserve. It's Kid Rock. That's who it is. It's Kid Rock. He sang that, but that was one of the best lines. I thought, wow, you get what you put in and people get what they deserve. You're going to reap what you sow. And if you do bad, you're going to get bad, period. So yeah, they offered strange fire. That would be the answer there. Those who perish in the wilderness because of unbelief. How many does it say there in bold? 603,000.
548.
Can you imagine? That many people paid the price because they didn't believe. Did I not click it? Oh, sorry. Good deal. That many people. 603,548 men of war paid the price. The total number of men of war that left Egypt during the Exodus was 603,550. You can look at that in Numbers chapter 1. 603,550 people left in war, and then only 2. Do the math. You're left with 2. Who was that? Joshua and Caleb. They were the only 2 that lived because the others did not think they would survive. Did not think that they would be able to take the city. What was the difference in Joshua and Caleb, though? Well, they
Thank God and be with them.
Thank you. They trusted. Trust in the Lord with all thine heart. Lean not to thine own understanding. In all thy ways acknowledge him, and he will direct thy path. Proverbs 3, 5, and 6. The Lord said, not one of you will enter into the promised land except Joshua and Caleb, because they did believe they could capture the land. Now, I need to turn my phone on silent. Unbelief, as I said, that was the reason. Now, people will say all the time, well, what about, it was unbelief? Yes, it was unbelief. So unbelief will get you exactly what you deserve. Nothing. They weren't able to enter into the promised land. Today, if we don't believe, we're not going to be able to make it to the promised land. If we are not obedient to what God has said, we've heard it, believed it, repented, confessed, and we're baptized to live faithfully unto death, guess what? We're in trouble. You and I are not doing what we've been asked to do. 603,000, that sounds like a big number. But think about all the folks that are going to be in torment. Many shall say unto me, Lord, Lord. But see, it doesn't matter what we say, it lines up with what we're doing, how we're living out our lives. We can say it all day long. I believe in Jesus. I can say I believe, but if I believe in him, my life is going to show forth evidence of that belief. My life is going to prove to you that I believe what I'm professing to believe, because I'm taking it serious, an earnest heed to the things that I've heard. I've taken an earnest heed. Going back to Hebrews 2.
John,
Yes, sir.
just one comment on this.
Okay.
About this situation. What God told us about in chapter 14, verse 22, God says, 10 times Israel has tested me. And so he had enough. And I think that same thing applies to our lives today. I think there comes a time that God will give up on us. Matter of fact, the Hebrew writer talks about that in Hebrews chapter 6 when he says about those people who did not believe. And, he lists 6 reasons there. Eternal judgment, the resurrection, faith, baptisms. And he said that when they fall away from these, it's impossible to renew them unto repentance. Now, I believe that God will put up with us so long if we continue to disobey his law or his commandments.
Yeah.
And since the people had left Egypt, it's only been about a year since they left Egypt. And already they had tested him 10 times.
You know, I think, I remember, you remember growing up, I don't know if you were wild and crazy, I'm sure you had somebody in your life telling you, you better get things right before it's too late. That's the truth. I mean, there's going to come a time when it's just going to be too late. Now, we got breath in our lungs. I'd say there's still hope. But if we continue to deny him, one day we won't have another opportunity. Period. We'll be in trouble. And so we've got to take it, like I said, give a more earnest heed to the things that we've heard. If we did that, if the nations did that, if America did that, we'd be in a different position. Entirely. Now we're going to talk about Saul's sin. The Amalekites smote the children of Israel shortly after they left the land of Egypt. Later, God instructed Saul to completely destroy. Now, this is what happens. He tells him, I want you to completely destroy them from this sin. They're not listening to me. I need them to be punished. What do we see that Saul did, though?
Well, he didn't completely destroy.
He didn't. He saved the king. He said, well, I'll spare the king and the livestock. It's not what.
Like it is, people made him good.
I didn't hear you.
He said the people made him good.
Yeah. And now, but you think too, God, when God says for you to do something, it's important. Again, like the ark, like Nadab and Abihu, we're seeing this sin and each example of the sins, like Jacob, he just, that was his punishment. We see that he was later deceived again, wasn't he? But we need to make sure we're doing what God asks us to do, the way God asks us to do it. At all times. It says there at the bottom, I put, Saul's sin is called rebellion and rejection of the word of God. If we rebel against what God said and completely just ignore certain parts of it, it's going to cost us. And it costed Saul the kingdom of Israel. It's going to cost you and me. If we're not careful, we're going to be in trouble. So Saul's sin, let's read 1 Samuel 15. Samuel also said unto Saul, the Lord sent me to anoint thee to be king over his people, over Israel. Now therefore hearken thou unto the voice of the words of the Lord. Thus said the Lord of hosts, I remember that which Amalek did to Israel, how he laid wait for him in the way when he came up from Egypt. Now go and smite Amalek and utterly destroy all that they have and spare them not. That's the problem that we see. He spared the king and the livestock. But slay both man and woman, infant, suckling, ox, sheep, camel, and ass. What did he do? He kept the livestock and he spared the king. He went against what God told him to do. If we read that verse right there alone, we can understand what God expected. But then he gave God something that he didn't ask for. Remember this, the sin of Cain, we talked about that, how he worshiped wrong because he did not offer it by faith, as Hebrews says. We have to do it the way God asked. Faith comes by hearing, and hearing by the word of God. He rejected the word, is what Saul did. We out of time? Yep. I'm getting close. All right, we're going to see if we can do this for the next few minutes. Sin of Jezebel. Let's talk about that. Is that what y'all see? Or do I need to click it again? Okay.
Yep.
Jezebel was the wife of Ahab, who did more to provoke the Lord. Now, yeah, Ahab was not a good guy. It says here he did more to provoke the Lord to anger than all the kings before him. Every one of them. 1 Kings 16, 29 through 33. And then Jezebel's sin included killing the prophets of the Lord. I'm sorry about the typo there. Both of them. Feeding the prophets of Baal during a time of famine, 1 Kings 18:19. She tried to kill Elijah. Notice, what was it in 1 Kings 19? I think it was 1 Kings 19, 1 and 2. Right after Elijah had defeated the prophets of Baal, in verse 19, or chapter 19, what do we read in the first two verses? That he was hiding from Jezebel, scared to death, wasn't he? Scared to death. Now, God gave him the boldness to stand up against the prophets of Baal and defeat them, but he was an emotional roller coaster. He's up one minute, down the next. He was afraid, and he allowed fear to control him. She calls Naboth's death, 1 Kings 21, 1 through 13. Elijah foretold of her death, I'm sorry. And it was, like I said, it was foretold in 1 Kings, and it was fulfilled. We see in 2 Kings 9. How was it that she died? What was the result of her sin?
She was cast down and the dogs ate her.
Eaten by dogs. That's a way to go out, isn't it? Could you imagine? I mean, think about it. You think about the most, I watch those movies, you know, where the fellas, they'll jump the fence and then there'll be a junkyard dog right there looking at them with the ferocious teeth, you know, and they're just standing still, scared to death. That's just them looking at you scared. And then usually the person that's in the movie will get away. But imagine not being able to get away and just having to be ate by them.
Jehu, who was the king of Israel, went to Jezreel to find her. And she come out and she asked her, in effect, will you come in peace? And Jehu said, who's on my side? And two eunuchs were up there and they said, we are. And he said, cast her down. They threw her down. And then he trumped her with his horse. And later on he said, go out and bury her. She was the wife of a king. And wouldn't anything left. The dogs had a few bones. The dogs had finished her off.
Have you ever seen a pack of wild dogs eat something?
Oh, it's
Not
ferocious.
inside.
No,
There's
it's,
nothing left but bones.
oh, it's bad. Yeah, it's absolute. Now, we need to get our daily Bible readers, and we'll start over on slide 14 whenever we return on Wednesday. Like I told you, we have a lot to discuss. We almost made it. We only have 3 slides left that we're going to talk about, finish up on Wednesday. So we're doing good. I actually got a lot further than I thought I would. So, but yeah, go back through this week and look at some of these accounts. Just read them and get more knowledge about them, because what we talked about, like I said, was just a kind of a survey, and we just kind of looked at it as an overview. There's a lot to learn from these.
You know how you got further than you thought?
Why is that?
Oh, you wound up.
I'm wound up today. I tell you what, I am. I'm wound up.
It's gonna be a good day and a good week. People out tomorrow.
Well, y'all gonna get to hear it tonight.